Well, ladies and gentlemen, joining us right now at their summit, the president of Americans for Prosperity at the Defending the American Dream Summit, Tim Phillips, is joining us right now here on the Final Say with Brett Rappaport, Jon Rappaport, and Jim Robbins with the Washington Times. Tim, it's a pleasure to have you join us today.
Brett, it's a rough-looking crew here. I better make sure that the hatches are battened down, right? So thanks for joining us, by the way, for this sixth annual AFP Summit.
Sure. Before we get into it, I just have to tell you that you guys do a fantastic job, really, on everything that you guys are involved in. I know you've pretty much dedicated a large portion of your life in the grassroots movement, and you are actually the example for a lot of people who have gotten involved over the last few years that probably wish they had been involved
Brett,
much sooner.
Thank you. Look, it's an honor to be on this team, and I mean that. That's not a cliche. I meet so many activists at events and summits like this and out across the country when we do AFP or Tea Party events, and these are people who work a job or two, put time in at their community and with their kids' schools or churches or synagogue, and then they find time to volunteer in politics. And to think that we have the honor to do this full time to try to make a difference, it is just that. It's an honor.
Sure. Now, Tim, on my former show, I interviewed you several times. We've had different types of discussions on policies, but I wanted to ask you now, could you give us an idea of some of the major accomplishments of Americans for Prosperity over the last, as far back as you'd like to go, but what are the biggest issues that you guys have had to face and deal with and actually make good progress on?
5 years ago, we launched an effort against global warming or the cap and trade and the other policies that the left were using as a result of their global warming ideology. And at the time, it looked like it was frankly, not a doable battle. I mean, everyone thought cap and trade was coming down the road. When Pelosi had a 50-seat majority in the House, Reid had 60 votes in the Senate, you had a president, and everyone thought we were going to get cap and trade, which would have been the biggest energy tax in history, a great freedom inhibitor. And AFP jumped into that with everything we had. And in the end, it was not just us. A lot of groups are in that, but it was defeated. And that's something that we think has made a big difference for our freedom and for the country. And secondly, I think in the end, the health care battle. A lot of people thought early on that health care was a fait accompli and that the American people wanted it. In fact, the first poll, Gallup did a poll spring of 2009 that said 64% of Americans supported Washington, D.C. health care reform. And I'll never forget that. We went to work, again, other groups, not just us, talk radio, social media, Tea Parties by then were launched and involved. And now we lost a very narrow, bitter battle in Congress, but we won with the American people. And those are two biggies for us. In Wisconsin.
And by the way, Steve Lonegan in New Jersey is still working on RGGI. And
I no doubt about that. You bet.
Yep. And in fact, I got an email. I think it was an email came to my phone, so I'm assuming it's an email this week regarding 3 achievements that the governor had vetoed or didn't support 3 initiatives. One being RGGI. Yeah. And also, the new state of New Jersey isn't signing up for the health care exchange. So
that's right.
These are our big accomplishments.
Well, we have 34 state chapters at Americans for Prosperity. We're not just kind of a national group that flies out from Washington and dispenses supposed wisdom. We have full-time staff in 31 of these state chapters, and they're the ones making a difference. Folks like Steve Lonegan and other state directors on the ground from those states, and they fight a number of local and state issues, like in Wisconsin, like in New Jersey. And I'm the most optimistic I've been in the 27 years I've been doing this.
Well, that's good. I wanted to ask you, as heading up an organization of so many members, what is the crossover when you partner up or work with other organizations? I mean, there's so many out there, other think tanks and activist organizations, but how does that work? And is there good relationships? And do you have a lot of joint efforts going on?
It's the best I've ever seen. Brett, our movement is individualistic, and that's a good thing. I mean, we're not collectivists, and thank goodness for it, right? Otherwise, we'd be liberals, we'd be left-wingers. So freedom is important, and when we work with local Tea Party groups or 912 groups or others, they're very strong about, hey, we want to maintain our independence. We may not always agree with you on an issue, but we come together on specific issue initiatives or specific education efforts. I know we were in Montana a month and a half ago, really pounding away at Senator John Tester, this big liberal Democrat senator, on his voting record. And the local Tea Parties there were like, hey, we agree with you on this. And they came into the events. They were joint speakers with us, joint co-sponsors. And that's an example of how we work together with them. Think tanks, I mean, today, Arthur Brooks was one of the first speakers at this national summit. He's the head of American Enterprise Institute, one of the great think tanks out there. We'll have Brent Bozell, obviously Media Research Center, one of the great organizations within the movement. He'll be speaking tomorrow. Penny Nance at Concerned Women of America. So many good friends and allies, and we do need to cross-pollinate more.
Sure, and we're excited. Penny Nance will be joining us, and Governor Scott Walker will be joining us at the end of our show.
Yep.
And quite frankly, none of this would be possible without the work that you guys did in helping to put together this event. And what's important is, I know just looking at the Radio Row, there's so many different people from different states who have come to small and large shows talk to their audiences.
Yeah, we have, I think it's almost 30 folks on Radio Row from across the country, talk radio. And look, talk radio, the way I describe it is you guys are the tip of the spear. I mean, every day there's a direct engagement on whatever the hottest issue of the day is. And that's something that's invaluable when you combine that with social media, and with the bloggers and the folks on Facebook and everywhere else. We've got an army we didn't have 20 years ago, and it's making a big difference.
Sure, and a great thing about talk radio is everybody's face is made for it.
No comment, man.
No, I'm just joking. But what I love about talk radio is I find that even doing interviews with members of Congress all the time, we have a lot more open and honest discussions than you'll hear on Fox News or CNN or NBC or any news network. That it seems to just be more soundbite-ish, very quick interviews.
I mean, you can take 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes and actually have a discussion. And that's harder on a network news effort where, 45, 50 seconds is a long time there. Talk radio does lend itself to more nuance, more back and forth. I think listeners appreciate that.
Sure. Now, I wanted to ask you a question because we do at least several interviews a week with members of Congress, and we've had a lot of very good conservatives come on a program. We've had people who aren't so conservatives who come on a program as well, and actually we are a show that welcomes anyone to join us. Right. Even you could be as progressive or as liberal as you want. We welcome you on the show to discuss the issues, and we may not agree with you, but we're welcome to have a discussion with you and allow both sides to state their points and positions. Right. And sometimes we find we have a little more common ground than you think. But when you guys work with Congress or you reach out, do you find that you're having success with both parties? Do you find that some people are a little easier to work with, or how does that work?
Members know that we have a genuine grassroots force back home in their states or districts, and I think that makes them more responsive because they know there are consequences if they try to avoid or try to ignore. And I think that's been one of the great things about the Tea Party, great things about talk radio. Every member of Congress now, at least the ones in districts that aren't just in crazy liberal bastions, there's only a few dozen of those, thankfully, they know that they're being held more accountable. And that's a big change from 10 years ago. I'll be out in the middle of nowhere giving a talk with 50 or 60 or 80 grassroots activists, and I'll mention what I think is a fairly obscure piece of legislation that we're working on, and heads around that room will nod because they know it's the most educated and the most dialed-in group of activists that we've ever had. And that's a big difference.
Yeah, you're right. I think it absolutely makes a big difference. The other thing is that we were talking about the challenge with, especially network news, right? These folks have literally seconds. I mean, by the time a subject gets interesting, it's already off the table. And that's not just a problem for diving into an individual item, but there's very little follow-up. Right, whatever the hot item is of that day gets a lot of it. Gets usually too much attention.
Right.
But then the follow-through. It's just like our legislators make laws. There's more gun laws on the books than we probably ever needed, but they don't follow up with many of them that are there. And what I love about groups like Americans for Prosperity, events like this, all the social media and the follow-up, is that we can actually take action, turn it into results, and we can track it, and we can continue not only to hold people accountable, but to keep the all the wonderful people like those, like the hundreds or thousands who are in attendance in the row behind us, participating and staying involved. And so we love what you do here.
No, thank you. You mentioned something about how a lot of times what leaders do, things are just not serious. They're not really, they're soundbite oriented. I think about that alderman from Chicago who was attacking Chick-fil-A. And making that kind of, I'm going to deny them the opportunity to operate as if he can destroy the First Amendment rights of a private company, when in reality Chicago has one of the highest murder rates in the country. I mean, here's a guy who has a city that in many respects is falling apart, and he's focusing on an ancillary issue for political or ideological reasons, and that's nuts. And I don't think American people are going to put up with it much longer. I look at this president, this administration, job numbers went bad again this month. I know you saw them go up to 8.3% unemployment. 42nd straight month with unemployment above 8%. This president's policies, he can talk all he wants about sound bites and cute ancillary issues and attacks on his opponents or Bush or whoever. But in the end, his policies have resulted in the worst economic recovery in modern American history. And that's a record that American people aren't going to put up with.
Well, because what does Americans for Prosperity stand for at the end of the day, right?
That's exactly right. Which means economic freedom and individual liberty.
And it means successful results.
That's right.
Right. Even if we disagreed with policies, but we turned around and we were shocked and said, hey, they actually really are working.
Right.
We might give it a second thought.
No, if unemployment were down to 4% and if we had a roaring GDP growth right now, then despite all the things Obama was putting forward, I may have to reevaluate. Fact is, we don't. We've had the most prolonged anemic recovery, and this isn't really even a recovery. We're still getting worse in our nation's modern history, and that's a direct result of this president's policies. And so our ideas are right. The proof is in the economic non-performance of the last 3.5 years. And I think for that reason, President Obama, this is just me talking, but I think for that reason, President Obama is going to be a one-term president.
And businesses hire, that we all know businesses, especially the large businesses, are sitting on an absolute wealth of capital. Businesses do not like to sit on capital. Working capital, sitting in a bank getting almost no interest is a nightmare for any business. But businesses hire when they predict that next month, next quarter, next year, they're going to see a better economy. The fact that they're sitting on piles of cash and not investing screams volumes about the fact that businesses, the people who know most about creating jobs, don't believe those jobs are going to manifest themselves.
The regulatory environment is too uncertain and too aggressive from the left and from government. There's no assurance there. You look at what Obamacare is going to do to businesses, raising up the cost of having individual employees because of the new regulations coming as a result of Obamacare. That makes them less likely to move forward. The deficits, the debt, $1 trillion plus deficits every year, that makes it a much more uncertain economy. Businesses, it's difficult for them to expand in such uncertain times. And the uncertain times are being brought about by this president's policies. And you're right, they're sitting on that money. They don't want to do that. They don't do it for ideological reasons or because they want to play games. They want to make a profit. That's the idea behind business, is to go out and create value and therefore make a profit, create jobs, and make life better for folks. But they can't do that when they're facing this uncertain, uneasy atmosphere out there. And by the way, you have a president who's demonizing job producers and folks who are achievers.
And for all the demonizing of these corporations, notice that they're not taking enormous percentages of the capital they're sitting on and paying it to themselves and their leading shareholders in the form of dividends. They continue to sit on their capital. What that tells me is, like the folks who are attending this great conference, they want to invest in America. They honestly, truly want to, but they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to make a good investment. That's exactly right.
And look, I talk to business folks every day, whether it's a small business owner running a dry cleaners in Ohio, or whether it's an executive at a fairly large company, and they all tell me that when you've got Obamacare regulations and mandates and fees coming down the pike, when you've got EPA and NLRB breathing on your neck and Interior Department, and when you have all the debt and deficits coming out of Washington, making the dollar endangered, now's not the time to broaden. Now's not the time to invest in new jobs and new business activity.
Now, I'll tell you right now that I've had a lot of friends in business all over the country speak to me over the last 2 years. And during the whole healthcare debacle, they've held back from hiring new people because they have no idea what their future costs are. And now they're telling me that they have no understanding of what their future taxation is going to be like either.
Right.
So
that's right.
In fact, they're actually, and it's a tough thing to do today, but they're looking to have more people come on as consultants and do things that way, even though you end up with employment issues on a statewide level.
Right.
So it's just nothing but endless trouble for actually doing business here in the United States. And when you look at it in the bigger picture, as in economically, we are in competition with China, who's growing very rapidly. We're in competition with India. In fact, we're really in competition with every nation for the business of the world, because business is global today, just as politics is, and everything else for that matter. We need to encourage growth in this nation. In fact, I'm trying to think, when was the last time that the president mentioned the word growth?
He only mentions the word in the terms of investment, meaning government spending. That's his idea of growth, is to have government pick winners and losers in the marketplace, something they're lousy at, and then pour taxpayer dollars or take us deeper into debt with money we don't have for this. And that's his idea of growth. It really is. It's a twisted idea.
I have to disagree with you. I think he's done a terrific job picking losers.
That's right.
Unfortunately, he did so on our dime.
That's true. It's not his money. He's playing with house money, right?
Hey,
our money.
Look, we can only laugh about it because it's that bad.
Well, the good news is the American people are smart. They figured it out, and that's why I think in the end, this president will be a one-termer. I do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And in fact, I think a lot of people who may ordinarily vote for him may not come out to show up.
Yeah.
And I think people who are in opposition are going to come out in record numbers. And
yeah.
Certainly hope so. I know everyone that's been working so hard on all these individual issue campaigns definitely helps out. But Tim Phillips with Americans for Prosperity, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great, wonderful conversation. I always enjoy speaking with you. We will certainly be back next year. We'll be involved with Americans for Prosperity all throughout the year. We will interview folks from your organization. And again, exceptional event. I'm looking forward to the rest of the day, tonight, tomorrow, and next week.
You bet. Enjoy talking to Governor Walker. I know you guys are going to be later on.
We will.
So
thank
you all very much, guys. Good
Thank
day.
you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was the president of Americans for Prosperity, Tim Phillips. And as you know, we are here in Washington, D.C., live at the Defending the American Dream.